During these conversations, we've been talking a lot about transforming culture in America. And one of the great things that you've been accomplishing here on campus is a podcast called The Extraordinary Story. I'd love to hear a little bit about, you just launched your third season of it, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what the genesis of that was, where did it come from, and kind of where that desire came from to start that show.
Yeah, it's really a lifelong dream, or at least an adulthood-long dream of mine to go in deep and look at the life of Christ. And I think what happened in my case, biographically a little bit here, is when I was a child, I kind of lost faith in Jesus. I think around age 10, as most people we're told do. He wasn't doing the sorts of things I was expecting him to do in my life, and nobody was there to explain why I should be expecting something different or what was going on. And so I just kind of lost faith. I stopped going to Mass. I refused to be confirmed in high school. I used to park my car at Mass so that if my mom drove by, she'd see the car there, but I'd hide in the back and read during Mass. So I had lost my faith. By a strange set of circumstances, which I won't go into here, I ended up at a college, which was a great books college, which showed, first of all, how a college can transform culture in America. Because this great books program, which was founded by Father Fessio, who founded the Ignatius Press, at one point it had produced the editors of National Catholic Register, Faith and Family Magazine, Our Sunday Visitor, Catholic World Report. So all these sort of people who had become leaders in the Catholic world came from this one program. But at any rate, I was introduced to the faith of this program. And what I was first introduced to was the community life of faithful people. And I really took to this community that was very welcoming and open and loving. But I never quite got the whole Jesus Christ part of it until a year I spent abroad actually sharing a room with the guy who would go on to be the translator of Pope Benedict's book about Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. So he's now considered, a world-class theologian, and he was my roommate, and I kind of discovered my faith there through a series of events that were really extraordinary. But I'll never forget the experience of suddenly realizing, wait, what if God actually did become man? No longer thinking of it as a story or a kind of a framework for a religious belief or a kind of a nice backdrop to cool things the church is doing in mankind and in history, but actually thinking, wait a second, suddenly seeing a real reality there. What if God, through whom everything was created, God, the second person of the Trinity, became a human being for real? And the consequences of that, once you take it seriously for the first time, are enormous. It means something for everything. It means something for science. It means something for art. It means something in your daily life. It means something in your relationships. And I just started to be fascinated by this question and try to unpack it a little bit. And what I did is I just read like gangbusters through several Life of Christ books. That became a genre that I discovered and that I really took to, which are books that go incident by incident through the life of Jesus Christ and just kind of describe what it was about. There's versions of it that are more like people who've been to the Holy Land talk about, and this is what he saw, and this is what the terrain is like. People who are very theological, like Romano Guardini, talk about how this is the implications of it for philosophy. There's people who are apologetics oriented who say this is why it jibes with what we think about other issues now in our modern day. I was really taken by Fulton Sheen's, which was kind of a combination of all of them and kind of a more inspirational take. But I must say, looking back on it 30 years later, I no longer have the same relationship with Fulton Sheen's that I did then. But I became a sort of a connoisseur, would be putting it kind of the wrong way, but I became a devotee of this genre. And then Well, okay, so let's fast forward in my biography a little bit. I came out of college. I went to work on Capitol Hill. I went from there into journalism, and I went from journalism to there and there into journalism. And I was able to become editor of the National Catholic Register newspaper, where it was just an astonishing vantage point to look at how grace functions in the world and how God's continuing story manifests itself, incarnates itself in real events. So we had a great editor-in-chief who gave us this sort of watchword for what our work was going to be like, and that was watching how Jesus Christ's story is unfolding in the events of our time. So I think, even though we were by no means the biggest circulation publication in America, I think that's the kind of publication that becomes one of the most significant publications in America, because we're the only one telling the true story. So the true story is that Jesus Christ is alive and well, and his life is still having implications here on earth. But through a series of circumstances that I go into in the first episode of the podcast, my faith hit a crisis point. And I started to wonder, who is this God who allows people to suffer? Who is this God who allows things like the sex abuse crisis to happen? Who is this God who has this church that does so many great things, but also is so weak and fallible and hurt and broken? And that caused a kind of a rebooting of me asking all these hard questions about faith. So basically, for the last 15 years, I've been doing work as a journalist where I do kind of Sunday meditation pieces. And I've used that as a way to research incident by incident, Sunday by Sunday, what's happening in Jesus Christ's life. And all the time in the back of my mind, I had this idea for the extraordinary story of someday telling the story of Jesus Christ's life and how it has implications in every aspect of our lives, in our personal identity, who we are who we are, and in the modern crises of faith that have to do with evolution and neuroscience and all of these things. And I must say, coming here to Benedictine College has been a huge grace in my personal journey as I kind of try to unfold the extraordinary story. You know, of those 15 years that I've been doing this, most of them have been spent here at Benedictine College. And I have a series of mini crises of the faith that I have that I've undergone, where suddenly I'll realize, wait, there was no writing until like very recently. If you looked at the whole history of the world, of mankind on the world, you know, it saw it as a calendar where January 1 was first Homo sapiens. Writing wouldn't come around until late fall, winter. So how is it that we have a faith where God reaches us through writing, through 10 Commandments, and that's this all-important thing? Why would God do that? Also, questions about how humanity developed into civilizations, and did we become agricultural beings who then later found enough time to ask religious questions, and why that doesn't jive with the Adam and Eve story in the right way. So what I do when I have these little mini faith crises is I'll go park myself in a theologian or philosopher's office and say, yeah, do you have a second? Yeah. And end up taking way more than a second. So I don't know if they dread seeing me darken their doorway, but I think they enjoy talking about these sorts of things. But I'll go in and I'll say, okay, I don't get it. Grace is supposed to transform us as human beings. And yet I know lots of people who've been baptized who haven't become new Christs. I know I was baptized and I didn't become a saint. I know that you have to kind of cooperate with your baptism. How is it different from just doing it on yourself? You know, asking these hard questions that they have answers to, but not easy answers to. And going through these things eventually bore fruit in the work I was doing, looking at each Sunday, and now is bearing fruit with the extraordinary story.